Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the webinar today. I will give it a few more moments just to let people comfortably arrive into the webinar room before we get started. And while we're waiting for people to arrive, feel free to let us know where your feet are touching the ground. I already see hello from Georgia, hello from Germany. My feet are touching the ground in Regensburg, which is also in Germany, in Bavaria. I'm at the Europark headquarters in a very sunny Regensburg, exactly. Portugal, Scotland, Netherlands, very nice. Czechia, I can see Europe is well represented already in the room. Okay, I will slowly get started. Um, Welcome, as I was saying, welcome everyone. Welcome to this webinar connected by nature that is taking place in the framework of the European Day of Parks 2026. My name is Esther Bossing. I'm Europarks Communications and Operations Manager, and I will be guiding you through the webinar today. We have a very exciting program that we developed together with our partner, Rewilding Europe, and I will tell you more about that in a second. But first, just to ensure that everything is running smoothly, a few housekeeping rules, let's say. You probably heard upon entering the meeting that this webinar is being recorded, and everybody that registered to the webinar will receive the recording in the upcoming days in their inbox. And we will also upload it to the Europark website and to our YouTube channel. So if you maybe have to leave throughout the webinar, no worries, you can catch up at your own time and at a later point. You will also see that you are muted. And because we are quite a nice group of people today, we won't give you the option to unmute yourself just to make sure that there's no disturbances while our speakers are talking. However, of course, that doesn't mean we don't want to hear from you. Quite on the contrary, we'd love to hear from you. So please, if you have any questions or comments, just post them in the Zoom chat. My lovely colleague Jess is also with us today, and she will monitor the chat and help answering any questions. We will have a little Q&A after each of the speakers, so we can address your questions during that time. There's also some colleagues from Rewilding Europe that will be able to answer any rewilding related questions. So we'll do our best to get to all of the questions during the webinar today. If you would like to respond to somebody's question, then do so by ideally directly responding to the message. It makes it just a little nicer because then it's threaded all together. To help us understand who's in the room with us today as well, feel free to rename yourself. You can also add your organization, and you can do so by finding yourself in the participant list, clicking on the three dots next to your name, and then renaming yourself. You are welcome to either keep your webcam on or off. I always like to see who's in the room with us, and I've already see some familiar faces as well and some new faces. But of course, completely up to you, and perhaps your bandwidth isn't so great, then of course, feel free to turn your webcam off. Good. Those were the housekeeping rules. I think that makes us ready to get started. And of course, I want to do just a quick introduction to Europark, because some of you might be very familiar with Europark. Some of you might actually come from a member organization, and others might not have heard of us yet. So, the Europark Federation, who I'm very happy to call my employer, is the largest network of protected area professionals in Europe. We have around 400 members in 40 countries, and the Europark Federation was established in 1973, while Europe was very divided by the Iron Curtain. So very, let's say, different times. And it's really arose out of a curiosity of those working in nature conservation, of those working in protected areas to understand what is happening across the border, what is happening by my neighbors, what is happening in other countries, and can we learn from them? And that curiosity, let's say, that eagerness to learn from other people, to look across borders, that is still very much the ethos of Europark today. And we want to support those um, protected area managers and those conserving nature by sharing excellence and knowledge. And we do so through projects like the Natura Connect project that you will hear more about today. Our programs, we have programs on youth engagement, on sustainable tourism, and also on transboundary work, which you will also hear a little bit more about today, and events. So events like these, webinars, but also our face-to-face events. Like next week, we have a big event on sustainable tourism happening in Italy. And every 2 years, we have the big Europark conference, which will happen again in 2027. And we believe that, yeah, we are the representative voice of protected areas in Europe, and we want to make sure that the needs yeah, the needs of protected area managers are heard across Europe, but also that the amazing work that parks and protected areas are delivering every day for society, for nature, for people is recognized. And to help with that, we established the European Day of Parks. And this webinar is taking, as I was saying, taking place in the framework of the European Day of Parks. It was launched in 1999 and it was really established as a day to celebrate protected areas throughout Europe. And now it's happening every year on the 24th of May, which is this Sunday. So in 2 days, the European Day of Parks is taking place. You can find all information on the website. And every year we have a specific theme. And this year's theme is Connected by Nature. We developed it together with our partners at Rewilding Europe. We've had an active partnership with Rewilding Europe since 2023. And together we came up with the theme Connected by Nature to really highlight that nature, well, it's stronger when it's connected, as are we, I think. Everybody thrives on connections. We as humans need connections to really feel at our best, and nature is no exception to that. So this is what we wanted to really showcase during this European Day of Parks, and that's of course also the topic of this webinar today. Because ecological connectivity, well, it's an ecological necessity. The unhindered movement of species and the flow of natural processes that sustain life on Earth ensure that species can migrate. It helps ecosystems adapt to climate change. It creates robust landscapes. So, of course, ecological connectivity is a very important concept in conservation. And I'm sure that I am preaching to the converted here. But protected areas are the building blocks for well-connected landscapes. We are looking at a Europe that is, of course, very, let's say, split up. We have roads that go through forests, we have dams inside of rivers, and we really need to work on creating these ecological connections both inside and outside of our protected areas. And that's what we're looking at during the webinar today. The importance of this ecological concept is luckily also recognized in a policy context, both on a global and pan-European level through the Global Biodiversity Framework of COM in Montreal, but also in the strategic plan of the Bern Convention. And of course, in the, as I like to call them, big three of the EU, which is the biodiversity strategy, the habitats directives, and the nature restoration regulation that is still recently employed. Maybe good to note here is that the habitat directives or the nature directives in the EU are currently undergoing a stress test, and the European Commission has launched an open consultation for feedback. So if you would like to participate in that, and of course it would be good to hear from the people on the field that are actually engaging and implementing these directives, the link to that is in the chat. Very good. However, without further ado, I would not position myself as the expert on ecological connectivity. I might be the expert on communicating about it, but luckily I'm joined here today by some really great speakers. And let me just take a moment to introduce them to you before we dive into their presentations. First off, we'll hear from Jeremy Dertien. He is a postdoctoral researcher at the German Center for Integrative Biodiversity Research, and in that role, he is part of the Natura Connect project. And the Natura Connect project is a large horizon project that's working on the development of the Trans-European Nature Network. And we'll hear some lessons learned from Jeremy as the project is slowly coming to a close in the upcoming months. Jeremy will immediately hand over to my colleague, Simone Presses-Durnagel. She's also part of the Natura Connect project from Europark's perspective, and she is sort of the brain behind the development of the Natura Connect learning platform. And that is a very exciting online learning platform with different modules to support those implementing the 10N, the Trans-European Nature Network. After Jeremy and Simone, we'll have a little Q&A. As I said, feel free, any comments or questions, write them in the chat. Please indicate who you would like to have answer your question. And then we're moving on and we're digitally traveling to the Netherlands and Germany in a border area. We're going to hear from André Klaassen, who is the director at the Maaswalmnetten Nature Park. And this nature park is an Europark certified transboundary area. As you might know, but around 50% of Europe's protected spaces are actually placed on the borders between different countries. So, of course, ensuring that these different countries work together and have the similar goals for conservation is really important. And the Transboundary Parks program supports these different administrations in delivering on that. And we'll hear two quite practical examples of connectivity actions that were happening on the ground from Andre. And then finally, we're traveling to Europe. Well, we're staying in Europe and we're going to Portugal to hear from Marta Kalix. She is working for Rewilding Portugal. She's the head of ecological restoration there, and she will explain what they're doing in the Greater Coa Valley in Portugal to support connectivity through rewilding initiatives. So that is our program for today. And with that, I open the floor for Jeremy. I will stop sharing now. Jeremy, feel free to get started, and I look forward to hearing from you.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Esther. You can see my screen okay?
Perfect.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for the invitation. I really appreciate the opportunity to present to you all. As Esther said, my name is Jeremy Dertien, postdoc here in Leipzig, Germany, and I've been involved with the Natura Connect project for about 3 years now, and it's been going on for about 4 years and coming to a close. Now, Natura Connect's is a very large consortium and is built upon 3 major pillars of co-development data creation. So both creating knowledge and new data sets for use by member states, leading to tools that can be used for future connectivity and conservation planning methods, and then capacity building resources, all in an effort to, as I said, create this co-development and realization of an ecologically representative, resilient, and well-connected trans-European nature network. So the consortium is made up of 22 different partner institutions, from academic university research institutes to different NGOs such as Europark, WWF, and Rewilding Europe. And we've been working under, and the driving force behind is the EU biodiversity strategy of reaching this 30% protection of conservation of land to 30 by 30 goals, with at least 10% being under strict protection. And then also, as Esther just discussed, about increasing the ecological restoration area up to 20%. So as we went about a visioning of how to construct this 10N, we knew it had to go beyond just identifying areas where protected areas could be expanded, but had to be built upon many different pillars, including both predictions of where biodiversity is highest and where they vary, the use of projections of going into the future of climate change and interactions between people and nature at the continental scale, And then also the utilization of case studies from the municipal scale around Leipzig and Danyana up to the national and Finland and Portugal and France, and then the multinational such as the Danube Carpathian Basin. This feeds then into understanding how we can expand these protected areas to meet both the goals, the 30% goals, as well as goals of making an interconnected protected area network. So as I said, my main role though is around understanding connectivity at the pan-European scale, but in a way that is utilizable for people at multiple scales. And so when we discuss connectivity, it's garnered an enormous amount of global attention in the conservation world, as many of you know, over the last few decades. We focus on how habitat fragmentation is reducing viable habitat. And I often present this figure from Wildlife Conservation Society as a good uh, concise way of presenting how we're losing large intact habitat areas into slowly morphing into what much of the European landscape now is of these islands and patches of habitat. Typically, the Natura 2000 sites are some of your protected areas that you manage. And then we are now left with these very small isolated habitat patches with large areas of unsuitable habitat around it. And this can reduce everything from dispersal ability and increase human wildlife conflict, and then down to what's becoming more and more recognized as the ecological processes that are being disturbed, such as sediment flow and water movement. So when we're discussing how to model and understand connectivity at a continental scale, we also need to be thinking about a wide variety of area scales and time scales. So typically in the past, so many connectivity analyses or connectivity results have focused on large mammals as an umbrella species, a species that can, through its conservation, protect numerous other species. But as we evolve into trying to understand how to protect total biodiversity connectivity, we need to be thinking about multiple area scales as well as time scales. And that's everything from individual movement over a full day, where a large mammal might be able to move in that space over a small day, or one day, up to a century of genetic flow, where, say, a salamander or amphibian might need numerous generations to move across it. So how might that look? Some of the lessons that we're learning through Natura Connect. So say this is your protected area, this is your region of interest. This is actually Saxony-Schweiz in Eastern Germany. We can begin by understanding where the connections are likely and possible across this network of a few protected areas. We can map those, and we've mapped those for the continent. We can then also start to understand how the different protected areas, the level of importance for different protected areas within that local network. So how important, if we were to lose one of these protected areas, does it collapse other connections to other protected areas? And so as we do that, we can set either priority values or understanding of how important keeping a population core is in that location. From there, and taking other connectivity models, we can then also move about prioritizing or ranking how of these corridors, the level of importance, and so how the loss of these corridors or the restoration of these corridors is important for maintaining connectivity over the total area. And then moving into more and more of the scale at which we end up working at is understanding how then the network at your protected area is connected to other local networks, and how the importance of those corridors then feed into the connectivity of a multinational transboundary regions. And then in the end, how thousands and thousands of corridors put together, how that is maybe a keystone to the connection across the entire continent. So when it came about connectivity planning from the Natura Connect perspective, we were coming from multiple perspectives. Mine was focused on the functional connectivity, so how about 950 species combined into 30 species groups, how those potentially move about or connected between current protected areas. We also looking at structural connectivity of different habitats. So about 250 different habitat types that several of which can be then fed and related to the habitat directives habitats. So, excuse me. So where those are highly important. And then also river riparian and freshwater connectivity, which is often underrepresented in these types of analyses. So we looked at riparian connectivity across all of the continent, as well using omnidirectional models, some similar models that I use that I'll present in a second, and then river connectivity and stream structural connectivity for the entire continent using a new barrier data set that we just created or we combined. So, some of this we can look at both the total where protected areas are and how they're configured, but then we've also looked at where some of these important protected area and connectivity areas are for each archetype. So areas that are highly compressed, where movement is being channelized into very local areas due to human development. So we can see, besides where protected areas are now, where some of the emergency areas are in these reds and greens, where connectivity is being pressed upon the most. And then finally, we can take all these different corridors that I was just showing you as we were moving into a higher and higher scale. And for all these different groups of species, we can overlap them and understand where they are where there's the best bang for your buck, where there's the most overlay, most multifunctional ability for a corridor. So we can see some of these areas that have bright red, such as in across Italy, the Carpathians, and the Pyrenees to Rhone Valley, just to name a few. Not trying to exclude anybody, but saying that we've shown through using everything from frogs and reptiles and bats and mammals that there's several of these corridors that can be multifunctional, and where you can, depending on where you protect, you can actually get at a large percentage of the biodiversity on the landscape. And then finally, we can bring, as I briefly showed, we can bring all these different types of connectivity models together and create a priority corridor index where you can zoom in and actually see, based upon the whole network of Europe, where some of the highest priority areas are for connectivity, especially as we've already talked about some on the transboundaries being some of the most important priority areas for connectivity, as well as mountainous protected areas that then moved into lowlands. So this was the connectivity work that I was primarily focused on, and which is available for use in restoration planning. But when it came to the overall vision of 10N, the connectivity was just one portion of what fed into these conservation plans. And so my colleague Louise O'Connor in Vienna, she took the connectivity that I was generating, as well as all this biodiversity data, ecosystem services data, from carbon sequestration to pollination to human recreational value, and fed that into models to understand where the best expansion of protected areas could be to get at these 30% protected goals, while also protecting and conserving the most of these different types of data. And so she went about and created 144 different iterations going into the future of how these plans could be combined and the best areas for these protections. So things like, if we were to change how the 30% goals are shared across different member states or bioregions or across the EU equally, to using and not using the connectivity data, and then also costs such as opportunity costs and cultural ecosystem costs. And this created a series of maps that can be used. They're 1 kilometer scale, so they can be zoomed in and seen. You can see where then each of those pixels should be protected or how much percentage of that pixel should be protected. And so we can see suggestion or recommendations for expansion, strict protect places that could be strict protection, and then also restoration protection. And so you can zoom in and start to see where there's that expansion built upon current protected areas, which then builds upon trying to connect these protected areas to each other. And then finally, you can take all these different scenarios and build and can start to combine them and see where is the most heavily overlapped and where can you get where the models are agreeing the most, and those should be the areas where you prioritize the expansion of protection or focus on strict protection. So the group in Vienna has created 2 different interactive scenarios, interactive maps that you can explore. These are going to be fully launched this summer at the end of the project. The Priority Check and Natura Connector. They're both ways of checking priority areas, and then Natura Connector will also have eventually the connectivity data on it. You can also, through all the different work packages, I believe there's 36 different deliverables and reports that are being generated across things from finance and governance to this connectivity data and conservation planning ecosystem services data. So this is the report that I contributed to as a part of and is available in our Rio collection. So you can search Rio collection Natura Connect and find all the reports there. And then that we also previously created this guidelines for connectivity for Europe, which has lots of background on connectivity and the concepts and policies, as well as the different tools and methods you can possibly use, and which feeds into our learning platform. So thank you very much, and I'll hand it over to my colleague Simona.
Thank you, Jeremy. Hi, everyone. So let me share my screen with you and let's talk a bit about the Natura Connect learning platform. So what you're seeing here is the homepage of the platform. The platform is being hosted in the European Nature Academy, which is an Europark platform for training courses. At the Natura Connect learning platform, we have currently a training course and easy access to all the project websites and platforms. So I will scroll down the homepage for you to have an idea on what we are offering here. So to register to have access to the Natura Connect learning platform, please register at the European Nature Academy platform. And then you will be able to explore all the training modules that we are preparing. So the training course is organized in 3 sections. The first one is the theoretical modules, where you will learn about the 10N policy, the Nature Futures framework, about connectivity conservation and integrated spatial planning. Currently, we have 2 modules already available in this section, and soon we will have the connectivity conservation module also available. In the second section, we have 3 modules regarding processes and instruments to help in governance. These 3 modules on stakeholder engagement, financial instruments, and political economy analysis are already available. So you can explore the materials there. And the third section is the technical tools, which compile tutorials on different frameworks and modeling possibilities that we are exploring in the project. So here you will learn about the project outcomes. Currently, we have available a tutorial on biodiversity modeling and climate change. And soon we will also have it there, tutorials on land use scenarios, connectivity analysis, and spatial planning. So for the training modules, the modules that are available, you can already explore the materials. We have different types of materials there, like ebooks, PDF, videos, and yeah, some different websites and external resources as well. For the modules that are not yet available, you can find an overview of the module to know what you will find there soon until the end of the project in September this year. So for example, the stakeholder engagement module was developed by Europar, and all the modules, the theoretical modules, are divided in different topics. For each topic, you will have different materials. Like here, you can see some videos and PDFs. And for each topic, you will also find a quiz and a summary of the main takeaways, and three additional resources on the topics and on the themes that has been covered in that topic. So here you can explore all the modules. You can also assess your training needs through an external platform that was also developed within the project. This platform, the TNA platform, is based on the IUCN competences. So yeah, we invite you to have a look and explore as well. Besides these, we have links and easy access to to all the project resources and platforms. So here you will find a short video from our stakeholder engagement event in January this year. Also the link to our website, the links to our stakeholder community, and to all the data sets and publications. So like Jeremy already mentioned, the Rio collection, you can find all the deliverables of the project, and you can also find the data sets and some other outcomes in the EBV data portal, the Zenodo platform, and for all the peer-reviewed publications, you can find links in our Google Scholar webpage. Last but not least, you can find here the links to all our social media platforms, our email, and you can also subscribe in our newsletter. We have the next newsletter being issued soon in the next months, and we will also have a final newsletter after the final event of the project in Brussels in September this year. So we invite you all not just to register and have a look in the Natura Connect learning platform, but also in the other courses that Europark is offering within the European Nature Academy. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you, Simone. Thank you, Jeremy. That was very enlightening. I know that Natura Connect is a big, big project. So I know I gave you only 15 minutes, so I know that there's a lot more to say about the project, but thank you very much for this overview. And yes, if anybody, the learning platform is open. It's only gonna become more and more populated, so feel free to check that out. I have a couple of questions. I'll start with you, Jeremy. There was a question about how to value nature patches that are not recognized as a protected area in the system developed.
Yeah, that's part of that comes from I ran out a little time to go deep into the omnidirectional ones, but those omnidirectional models allow for understanding where there's really high priority connectivity areas outside of protected areas. And and so those initially are some of the quickest ways that we have to find priority areas outside priority habitat patches. Others are where they coincide with where would be important stepping stone areas between in those corridors we've already mapped for connectivity between protected areas. But that's also ongoing projects that are about to start that are going to expand upon this Natura Connect, some of the Natura Connect connectivity output. we'll be exploring even more so how to identify those and restoration potentials.
Great. Thank you very much. I think that was Andre. I hope that answered your question for now, Andre. And then there was also a question about the mapping being publicly available. I think that's what you mentioned at the end, that that's part of the Natura connector that will be launched at the end of the project. Is that right? Or
Yes, so that's one of the platforms. So there'll be a new iteration of the data in a few weeks that I'll be putting up on Zenodo. So there'll be a new edition of that data with taking in some of the stakeholder input that we received in some of our stakeholder workshops, including the one recently in Brussels. And then the Natura connector will have an interactive map form of a couple of the connectivity data sets, but overall there's about 120 different types of connectivity data that are final produced, so I can't really present it all in that one.
sure. Thank
So
you.
sorry, so Zenodo and Natura connector would be just the simple answer.
Okay. Great. Thank you very much, Jeremy. I have two questions from Sana, and I feel like Jeremy and Simona, maybe you can answer it together a little bit because my Sana, my colleague, by the way, hi Sana, is asking about how the foreseen data that is generated will reach planners, policymakers, and decision makers, and if it can be fed into education of planners. And I think kind of related to that, if the education material produced could be part of more formal education for planners, and what you believe would be needed to make this happen.
Simona, you want to first crack at that? What would you
Big question, I know.
But uh, or I can go first. Sure. Uh, the the access, I mean, part of it is different channels of stakeholders that we've tried to incorporate and include during the project. So a lot of, like I said, we've had a couple of these Brussels events, but then we also have these case studies that are occurring at the Portuguese scale, which I just presented at, and also have done about 25 other Nature Connect presentations to different member states and local regions. And then through these different deliverables and reports, we've tried to put them into much more useful language and figures and data sets that are useful. Sorry, I didn't hit on everything of that question, but Simona, maybe you can hit on a little bit more.
Thank you, Jeremy. Yeah, for the learning materials, they are all freely available in the learning platform. And we hope that not just the project partners, but also other organizations make use of it and further explore to be included into more formal education for planners. We will be pleased if the project results will have that use as well. It's a bit out of our control, but all the materials are being based in the project outcomes. So this has been thought also that we make it to be in an easier language, in a more friendly format as well, so they can be further explored. Thank you.
Thank
And
you
that
very
and
much.
that's why it's so useful to have such great NGO partners that can hit us academics over the head and say, why are you making it so complicated sounding? You need to make it useful. So I appreciate that.
We appreciate it as well, Jeremy.
It's a fine line. Andre is actually asking, how do you ensure that university teachers know and tell their students to use the material? Simone, that question was for you.
Again, sorry.
Sorry, how do you ensure that university teachers know about and tell their students to use the material? I know we have universities as part of the project, so that's good, but yeah.
Well, yeah, for sure we are counting on the help of our partners to disseminate that the materials are available. And we've been promoting it extensively as well. So for all the modules that are launched, we've been promoting them in our social media channels. And for sure, Europark will have a great opportunities as well in the future to explore and to disseminate these among our members. So yeah, it's this small work that everybody has to do to spread the word. And then, yeah, I think that's the maximum we can do. And for sure, with all these organizations involved, there's a lot of people that can be reached.
Exactly. That's also why Natura Connect is, of course, here today. And you're very welcome after this webinar to keep spreading the word about all the materials available. There's a couple of more questions in the chat, both from Anna and from Peter. Maybe Jeremy and Simone, if you could answer in the chat directly, just because, yeah, with an eye on the time, I have to actually move on to the next presenter. But thank you, everybody, for your questions, and feel free to keep them coming, and we can keep answering them in the chat as well. And thank you again, Simone and Jeremy. So, without further ado, we are traveling to the border area of Germany and the Netherlands, and we will hear from André Klaassen. So, André, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Esther. Yes, my name is André Klaassen. I'm a director of the cross-border nature park Maaswalnette, and those are the names of 3 rivers. And as I guess nobody knows where they are, they're there at the red dot in this map of Europe. If I zoom in, this is our working area. It's about 1,000 square kilometers, and the purple line is the border of Germany and the Netherlands. We don't manage the area. There is a nature park on the German side, a national park on the Dutch side, and several municipalities involved. Our organization is trying to connect both sides of the borders and work together. So we stimulate, we initiate, and we support the international cooperation here. We bring the people together, and preferably on a ground level. These are the themes we're working on. And like I said, we connect people and we initiate and coordinate projects. Esther asked me to highlight 2 projects that we're working on connectivity. I have one that we already did some years ago. I was not involved in Maaswalnette at the time yet. And one we are applying for Interreg subsidy to be able to actually do that work. For the wetland project, I would like to show you this this height map. On the red, you see higher areas. The darker, the higher. The greener, the lower. And you see a catchment area. The darker areas, the water that is coming down there seeps into the soil and comes out in the middle area where it's lower. There used to be a very wet line with peat, with bogs, with fence, all kinds of wet, unuseful lands, as they used to regard it from an economical point of view. And unfortunately, they drained a lot of that area, so all that connectivity disappeared. And now we'd like to restore that by removing very fertile topsoils, digging new ponds that have all year-round water. Yeah, to restore the drainage done, to restore the loss of biodiversity, and to stop the decline of bogs and ponds. To show you where they are, I will show you. I must do a little trick here. Now I share my Google Maps screen, where you see the dark patches on the map you saw before. They are here in dark green. And as I zoom in this area, you see this girdle of what's supposed to be wetlands. And you see here the intensive agriculture that was a result of the drainage. And we restored some of the fence here. For instance, this one on this area. There is a whole really interesting tectonic movement issue, which you can see in this line here, but I don't have time to go into that. We restored this this fan, and we placed, I don't know if you can see it on the map. No, you cannot, because there are trees covering it. A small watching hut, so you can look over this fan. If I zoom out, you see here some dark patches, also new made fence. And now one of our prides is the one over here. This used to be a small fan which was attractive and ecological valuable in the past. But a lot of people came there walking their dogs, etc. And it was not so interesting anymore. We dug a whole new patch here. It has water all year round, and we made a boardwalk for the people to be able to see this area, but not touch the water. And I'll go back to my presentation. And now you can see in these areas, these vegetations. I don't know if you can see a lot of details, but this is we're quite happy with what we see here, or this. All right. Yes, I'll continue right away to project 2. If there are questions about project 1, I'll hear them in the end. We are working now on a project, we call it roadside management. As I said, it's in application right now. This is how we like to see. This is what we like to see somewhere around in the landscape. And usually, or in former times, we used to see this on the edges or the corners of agricultural fields, but agriculture has intensified, and it's hard to see all these flowering plants around. So this is becoming a big issue. Here you see another nice picture, a lot of variety. This is a grassland, but it also holds a lot of flowering plants, which insects can use. But as you know, insects are declining all over Europe because of this intensification, because of the use of chemicals. A lot of recent climate change also involved. This is a big issue, and insects need connections. What we see is a fragmentation of the habitat. I already mentioned the other factors here, but the fragmentation of the habitat is really a big issue in our area. We have intensive, high economic agriculture. And then you see that the connectivity is lost. Here you see a map. The green are the nature patches. And we see that they are isolated, for instance, here in the middle. What we are trying to establish in this project is to re-establish connections from nature patch to nature patch. And therefore, we indicated road banks, like the 2 or 3 meter next to the road you drive on, as an important factor, as an important habitat for these flowering plants, but also the insects that need them and that can use them to travel. We are focusing on south-north because that's the climate change effect that we are seeing. Species are traveling north, and we'd like to facilitate that to be able for them to survive. They need feeding grounds like flowering plants, but also reproductive grounds. Sometimes they put their eggs in bare soil. and sometimes on a certain species. We need to look at both factors. But to say in a general, they need a lot of variety of flowering plants. There are many species which have their own specific demands. And this is what we not like to see. We see here the road bank with only grass. And that's nice for the cows, but not for insects. Here you see another example. It's very short. It's doesn't have much the biodiversity. What we see a lot is that the road managers, they slash the material. It remains on site and is therefore nutrition for the grass. But we don't want the grass, we want flowering plants. So we need to reduce fertility of the soil. That means we want to take away the cuttings. We can do that by slash and suck it off in a big machine, but then also all the seeds and insects that are there are lost. The idea is to mow, preferably to let it dry so the seeds can drop off and then collect the material. And we want to leave patches for insects to have like a hotspot to disperse into the mowed area again. What we see is that a lot of these roads are managed by the municipalities, and there are many different levels of experience, of acceptance, of knowledge in these municipalities. So that's what we are addressing. We're organizing workshops to exchange knowledge. We demonstrate modern machines of how to mow. We are actually changing the mowing regime for selected road banks, and we have an intervention. We will make intervention plans for multiple years. We cannot change everything at once, but we start with these ones and then we slowly expand. And we communicate to all people involved, the internal municipal structures, including the city council, inhabitants, and visitors. And to make this all cheaper, we are planning to use the material with a process called fermentation, so that the material is not waste, but can be used in improving agricultural soils at the farmers nearby. These are our participants in the project. Here you see what we're aiming at. Many flowers, many species, a lot of variety. Here we see habitat for a lot of insects that can use this as their own highway to the next nature patch. This is what we also like. And now I have a quiz question. I am happy about what I see in this picture, and my question to you is, why am I happy with this picture and why am I unhappy with what I see here?
Thank you, Andre, for the question. If anybody knows the answer why Andre is happy or not so happy, feel free to pop it in the chat. Much biodiversity. I'm guessing that's unhappy. Happy that the area is left unmown. Happy because not everything was mowed at the same time. No buffer zones between the habitats. The grass is left to dry. This seems to be a reason to be happy, and the right species are growing. So, Andre, can
Yes.
you enlighten us? Why are you happy or unhappy?
I heard one of the right answers. I'm happy because they don't mow everything at once. So you see on the left side, you see, they mow 2 meters, and the rest is left to bloom, to stay, to ripen. So that's why I am happy. I'm also happy, but you can't see it on this picture. This is a close-up. I'm already happy that I can see some different species than grass. On the lower half, you see some yellow plants and yellow flowers. So that's also a reason to be happy that although it doesn't look much in this picture, there is some biodiversity. What I'm unhappy about is that they slashed the material and they're not picking it up. So it's left to rot, and the nutrients will be nutrients for the grass again. So that's what I'm not happy about. I would like to see this taken away. And if we do that, oh no, that was it. And this is how I'd like to see. Here you also see on the right side, here you see there's a mowed area, but there's no grass remaining. They took it away, and here is the grass. Okay, that's what I wanted to share with you. Two very practical projects we are working on to restore connectivity. If you have any questions, I'm pleased to answer them.
Thank you, Andre. I would take the opportunity to maybe ask the first question, because I would be interested to hear you were speaking about these different levels of acceptance when it comes to the initiatives that you would like to implement. Um, what what levels of acceptance are you experiencing, and is there a difference between maybe the Dutch side of the border and the German side? How does that differ?
There is a difference between the Dutch side and the German side. On the Dutch side, the municipalities are very strict, well, very professionally organized. I use the word professional, but the Germans are also professional. What I mean to say is that they, on the Dutch side, a lot of work is done by contracted companies. So the people from the municipality, they decide we want it to look like that, and then they ask a company to do it. On the German side, the municipalities have employees that do the work. And that gives a difference in how they work and how they look around and how they are informed. Yeah, it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of engagement to work through this process. And the acceptance is different from different people. What we hear from the people in the municipalities is that they work on this with colleagues, they work on this with inhabitants, but then if they stop mowing 4 times a year, so it looks like a golf course, you see flowers, and in spring it's nice. Actually, most of these nice pictures I showed, I took 3 days ago. So now it looks nice, but in autumn, it looks a bit like shit. And then you have people complaining to the mayor or to some other official in the municipality, and then they say, we have to stop this project because the banks don't look nice anymore. So it's about explaining, making people understand why we are doing this is a really important action. And that's why we spend quite some effort on communication to different stakeholders. And especially the city council, because if they need to know and they need to be able to answer questions from the inhabitants.
Sure. Yeah, we know that I guess both in the Netherlands and in Germany, there's a tendency to go with a ruler next to your grass in your garden, and
Yeah,
everything needs to be very tidy and very clean.
yeah,
We need to really work on the understanding of, well,
yeah.
sometimes nature doesn't look clean, but it is actually amazing for
Yeah,
both you and I.
it's understanding the seasons in a year.
Yeah,
This is
exactly.
spring, and that is autumn, and then in autumn things die, but they produce seeds that we need next spring.
Exactly.
So this is a knowledge that is lost by many people who are focusing on,
Yeah,
have a high focus on the economics of ruling municipality.
sure, sure.
Yeah.
There
Other
was another
questions?
question, yeah, for you, Andre. If it's possible to see the effects of the restoration activities on the biodiversity in the areas that you've restored, have you been able to do any monitoring on its effects, for example, with the wetlands or?
Yes, we see nice results, especially because there is a groundwater flux. The rain from the higher areas is going into the soil, and then it's coming out, and that water is really clear. We are seeing the results. I personally don't do the monitoring, but we do follow what is happening there. And yeah, we see good results, and we're very proud of the results of this project.
Great.
But I
There
cannot
was
give you the species that reoccurred. I'm sorry, so I'm not a botanist.
That's okay. There was one more question about, I'm not sure if you will know because of course you weren't there during the wetland activities, but uh, about removing the topsoils and why that was done. Because yeah, a lot of soil in Europe is in critical condition, and would that not be actually a loss for soil conservation, if you know?
Yes, I do know. In the Netherlands and parts of Germany, the area used to be wet, and that was flattened out. There were big, how to say, canals were dug to take the water away, and the field was used for agriculture for a few decades. And in that decades, the topsoil was over fertilized. So we have a high quantity of phosphate and of nitrogen in that top layer, say 30 to 40 centimeters. It would take ages to reach an interesting biodiverse vegetation in those areas. And that's why on some areas, not all, but on some, we choose to take away the top soil and reach the original mineral soil that's underneath. Having two advantages: we getting closer to the water level in the soil, which is also lowered because of all that agricultural activity in the past, and in the surroundings, it's continuing. So that's why we took it away.
Great. Thank you, Andre. I think there's another question in the chat just about the input of nitrogen, but again, keeping an eye on the time, maybe you could answer directly in the chat to that, Andre, so we can, yeah, keep to our restricted time until 12. So thank you again, Andre, for this interesting example of what's happening on the border between the Netherlands and Germany.
Mhm.
And
You're
now
welcome.
we will travel to Portugal, to Marta. Marta, the floor is all yours, and feel free to start sharing your screen.
Hi, everyone. Let me share my screen. Please let me know if you can see it. Full screen. Okay. So good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here today. My name is Marta Callis. I'm head of ecological restoration at Rewilding Portugal. And today I'm going to be talking about rewilding for connectivity in the Greater Coa Valley. So just a bit of background first. Rewilding Portugal was created in 2019. It is based in Guarda, which is a small city in a rural area of northern Portugal. We work in partnership with Rewilding Europe in the Greater Coa Valley rewilding landscape, and our mission is landscape scale rewilding, restoring trophic chains, natural processes while supporting the local communities whose livelihoods are tied to this territory. We are a small team. You can see most of us here in this picture, which means that everything we do depends on partnerships, other landowners, and on long-term relationships that make ecological restoration work in a landscape with very little formal protection. The Greater Coa Valley is one of 11 rewilding landscapes across Europe, where Rewilding Europe and its local partners are working to demonstrate what landscape scale rewilding can achieve. From the Afric Islands in Scotland to the Southern Carpathians in Romania, these landscapes share a common approach: restoring natural processes, bringing back wildlife, and building the conditions for nature-based economies. Together, we add up to something important, a continental scale network of sites where rewilding is being tested, monitored, and refined in very different ecological and social contexts. Zooming in, the Greater Koa Valley is roughly 318,000 hectares, and it encompasses the entire watershed of the Koa River. It is a north-south landscape running between two large protected areas, the Douro International Natural Park in the north and the Serra da Malcata Nature Reserve in the south. Almost all of it is privately owned. This area is and has been a natural wildlife corridor for a very long time. We have 30,000-year-old rock engravings in the Koa showing the animals that our ancestors lived with in this landscape, such as wild horses, aurochs, deer, and ibex. It is located at the confluence of the Mediterranean and Atlantic biogeographic regions, and the valley supports exceptional biodiversity. Mediterranean woodlands of olm oak and cork oak transitioning to montane scrublands. We have riparian forests that shelter rare species such as wildcats and black storks, and also abandoned agricultural areas that create diverse habitat mosaics. The region lies along the southern edge of the distribution of the Iberian wolf population, and there are some Iberian wolves using the landscape, which is very encouraging. We also have several scavenger species, bird species, such as Egyptian vultures, black vultures, and cinereous vultures. And overall, for birds, this is a really important area. However, this landscape is facing an ecological and socioeconomic crisis. Centuries of intensive land use, followed by widespread abandonment, have degraded ecosystems and severed ecological connectivity. The absence of large wild herbivores has simplified habitats, while agricultural intensification in remaining productive areas and poaching have eliminated wildlife refuges. Agricultural abandonment in the absence of abundant wild grazers and browsers increases the risk of wildfires, which have become an increasingly serious threat in this landscape, largely caused by human actions, either through negligence or intentionality, and there are very few legal consequences. Repeated burns deplete the natural seed bank, making it difficult for native vegetation to recover, and as a result, large areas have been taken over by pioneer plants such as broom, which develop very dense growth and accumulate significant biomass, which, again, in the absence of large grazers that would naturally reduce vegetation and create fire breaks through their grazing and movement, this buildup of dry biomass remains untouched and primed to ignite each new fire season. This cycle of degradation also has wider ecological and socioeconomic consequences. Frequent high-intensity fires reduce habitat quality for wildlife, push sensitive species into smaller refuges, and accelerate soil erosion, which in turn reduces water retention. For rural communities, recurring wildfires threaten homes, farmland, livelihoods, reinforcing negative perceptions of natural vegetation and wildlife. The landscape is trapped in a fire-prone state where ecological recovery is continually interrupted, management costs escalate, and long-term resilience is weakened. Breaking this cycle requires addressing both ecological and human dimensions simultaneously. And this becomes even more important when climate models tell us that this landscape is not just a local restoration opportunity, it is a critical corridor for species that will need to move through it as conditions shift across the Iberian Peninsula. So, a study connecting Iberian protected areas showed that static protected areas will likely lose their climatic representativeness over time, and that it is the corridors between them and the recipient areas at the northern end that will sustain biodiversity as the climate changes. In 2021, this paper by Mingarro and Lobo that was published in Environmental Conservation modeled the future climatic representativeness of all mainland Iberian national parks. And the finding was quite stark. Climatically representative areas across Iberian national parks are projected to decline by around 89% of their current extent under future climate scenarios. Several parks are projected to lose their representative climatic conditions entirely, including the only one in Portugal, which is Peneda Gerês in the north of the country. So the implication is direct. If species cannot move to track shifting climate conditions, protected areas alone cannot sustain them. If you look at a species like the Iberian lynx, for which climate projections suggest that suitable habitat in the south of its current range will become increasingly marginal, while new areas further north may become viable, the absence of functional corridors is not a future problem, but already a present one. In another study from 2025, Miguel Araújo and colleagues published a systematic conservation planning analysis in Biological Conservation, which is the most recent and rigorous assessment of Portugal's conservation network under climate change. Using species distribution models for terrestrial vertebrates, they identified two regions as critical for species conservation through the 21st century. The first is the central western Atlantic coast, and the second is the northeastern upland region, circled in red, the Greater Coa Valley landscape. These areas are projected to function both as range retention refugium, which are places where species currently present can continue to persist under climate changes, but also displacement refugium, places where species start to arrive from further south and need to establish there as conditions shift. So the Coa Valley's north-south orientation makes it a natural movement corridor for species tracking climate change. And it connects two protected areas that, precisely because of their location in this zone, will matter more as the century progresses. So the scientific case for investing here is quite strong. The operational challenge is that almost none of the land needed to make the corridor work is protected. So in the Greater Coa Valley, nearly all land, including areas classified under Natura 2000 and other protected area designations, is privately owned. 90-something% of the country is privately owned. So this has created a fragmented landscape in which hundreds of small, dispersed parcels must be managed coherently if large-scale ecological restoration is to succeed. Even within priority conservation areas, landowners retain significant autonomy over how their properties are used, which can limit or delay restoration measures such as natural grazing, woodland regeneration, riverbank recovery, or the establishment of wildlife corridors. Actions that require coordinated management across tens of thousands of hectares are challenging when each parcel is subject to individual decisions, priorities, and economic pressures. This patchwork pattern of ownership has also complicated enforcement and monitoring of environmental regulations. Activities such as forestry operations, hunting, or incompatible livestock practices are carried out inside Natura 2000 boundaries if landowners are not aligned with ecological objectives. Existing policy tools and agri-environmental incentives lack the scale, duration, or clarity needed to foster unified action among diverse landowners. So what are we doing about it? We are deliberately constructing functional landscape connectivity across privately owned, largely unprotected land. Land acquisition and management agreements are sort of the first step for this. We have some rewilding sites, which Rewilding Portugal owns, in das Águias, Valcaripito, that we have managed to purchase somehow opportunistically in a constrained land market. But knowing this actually shapes how we think about long-term planning. Every site we secure is a stepping stone in the landscape and an important piece in improving overall connectivity along the Greater Coa Valley. Natural grazing is another of the tools in the toolkit. Our Soraya horses and Taurus cattle are creating the mosaic structure, grasslands interspersed with open woodlands, that supports animal movements and critically reduces fire risk at the same time. Connectivity and fire resilience aren't separate problems here, so they need to be addressed simultaneously. We also work extensively with other landowners and hunting associations. The matrix between our own sites is very vast. We currently only own or manage 0.5% of the Greater Coa Valley landscape, so connectivity needs to be built across all of it. That means relationships, trust, and patience. We have several ways of doing this, from managing the land of other landowners to integrating them into our Wild Portugal network, carrying out nature restoration and capacity building activities with different stakeholders. It is a puzzle that needs to be built piece by piece, and it is a long-term generational work. We are just at the beginning of a very long road. Coming back to the topic of connectivity, through the Endangered Landscapes and Seascapes program, we looked at the connectivity baseline for the Greater Coa Valley using a Sentinel-2 land cover mapping and morphological spatial pattern analysis. We identified 5 core habitat areas and 4 rewilding sites along the Coa-Agda axis, and the overall finding is encouraging. The corridor is mostly permeable. Core areas are functioning as stepping stones connected by woodland bridges, but, and this is important, there are some significant gaps still towards Malkata in the south, and at least 3 areas where targeted restoration would meaningfully improve both north-south and east-west connectivity. One of the limitations here is that we can't yet fully separate native woodland from plantations in the remote sensing analysis, so some of what looks like connective habitat could actually be barrier habitat. We expect that as methodologies improve, we will continue to get better and better data. As I said, we are early in this work, and I want to be careful not to overclaim in terms of impact and results. The connectivity baseline cannot yet show us measurable change. Woodland regeneration takes decades, and we have not been measuring long enough. But there are some signs that we might be headed in the right direction. A survey conducted by the University of Aveiro documented the recovery of roe deer across the landscape over the past 7 years. Roe deer are not a flagship species, but they are a sensitive proxy for landscape permeability, a medium-sized ungulate that needs connected habitat to move, disperse, and establish new territories. Their return across the corridor tells us the landscape has good connectivity for at least some species. Red deer have shown documented northward expansion into the valley, which is consistent with the climate corridor function we would expect this landscape to serve. For wolves, we are seeing dispersing individuals moving across the landscape. This matters specifically because wolves are large carnivores with very large home ranges and high sensitivity to landscape barriers. Their movement across this terrain tells us the corridor is permeable even for species with the most demanding spatial requirements. We have one data point from an Iberian lynx crossing underneath a major highway in the landscape, which demonstrates that targeted infrastructure can maintain connectivity across what would otherwise be a hard barrier. Iberian lynx is also expanding, and they're not established yet in the Greater Coa Valley, but we're hoping they will establish themselves in the future. And then we also have a Cinereus vulture colony in Malkata, which is connecting the Tejo to the south and Douro to the north populations in a colony that is bridging these 2 river systems. So none of these things individually are proof that our interventions are working, but taken together they are consistent with a landscape that is recovering its ecological function, in which species are beginning to move through it and food chains are beginning to reassemble. So looking to the future, we know that protected areas are anchors. The question now is what is attached to them and between them. The Douro International Nature Park and the Serra da Malcata Nature Reserve are protected areas, but wolves, wildcats, lynx, they don't recognize their boundaries. We need the whole landscape to be connected. And the species that will matter most as climate shifts, the ones that need to move north, that need to track changing conditions through the century, will depend on that unprotected matrix being functional and permeable. What we have learned in the Coa Valley is that building that matrix is possible. It is slow, it requires sustained funding and long-term commitment, and it depends on relationships that take years to develop, but it is possible. Protected areas are and will always be essential, but they are no longer sufficient. The species that will define the ecological future of this landscape need large landscapes of connected habitat. So they need the whole landscape to work. And building that landscape is the work that we will continue to do in the next decades. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marta, for this very interesting story and approach to what is happening in Portugal. I'm once again just gonna take the opportunity to ask my question first.
Sure.
You mentioned that, yeah, the processes that you've started in the area, it's the beginning of a very long road. Is this a difficult message to quote unquote like to sell? Is it hard to get people on board because you're working with a huge range of stakeholders, which yeah, and a lot of landowners. So is that difficult, and how do you approach that?
I think the most difficult thing to try to put across is that we're looking to the future with a different vision for this landscape. So we're looking at what this landscape could be like in the future, because the narratives nowadays is rural depopulation, wildfires, abandonment. It's all very negative. And so we're trying to say, no, this can actually be in the future a thriving landscape full of biodiversity where local economies benefit by all of this nature being here with nature-based economies and things like this. But it's quite the effort. It's an imagination exercise for people to be able to see the landscape in that way. And so a lot of our work focuses around also, communicating this and trying to show what it could be like in the future if everything that we're doing now is continues to be carried out in the long term. But like you're saying, it is a challenge.
Sure, understandably so. I think Stein's question is a little bit related to that. Is there any ideas for alternate revenue streams that you can offer to landowners to get them cooperate in connecting the landscape?
This is such an interesting topic, and I could talk about it for a very long time, but I'll just mention a couple of things. Absolutely, we need economic incentives. And I think a few things are starting to come through. We hear about payments for ecosystem services, carbon and biodiversity credits. Um, in some countries, like in the UK, they have very positive movements towards biodiversity net gain schemes and things like this. So I think we're finally starting to realize that nature is not an externality to our economic model, but that we need to incorporate nature into how we do the accounts, and that we can't continue to pay for some things but not pay for others. So there are and a lot of issues, for example, with the common agricultural policy, as most of you probably know. And the thing that we're paying people to do things that are bad for the land, that are bad for biodiversity, is nonsense, because we're spending the money anyway, and we might as well be paying them to do things that are actually nature positive. So there's a lot of room for improvement, and I think we're headed in the right direction. But, we need to do it faster and be more ambitious and be bolder with these kind of initiatives.
Yeah, thank you, Marta. Couldn't agree more. Um, I think there was another question, and now it sort of jumped. Sorry, 1 second. Yeah, there's a question from Udo asking if it wouldn't be more useful to use the functional animal groups that Jeremy has used to check connectivity of landscapes. The emblematic species you have presented produce much less movement than data than the group Jeremy has shown.
Yes. So connectivity, it's a whole science, right? And there's a lot of different methodologies, a lot of different possible approaches. We have only done one initial study, but we definitely have a lot of room for improvement and looking at other types of ways of studying connectivity. So I would say that for us, this is an area that will probably be a priority for the next few years in terms of also looking at different ways of studying connectivity and understanding it better. So yes, definitely.
Thank you. And there was another question about educating tourists. Do you find that educating tourists who may be looking for ways to travel to areas and minimize their footprints helps? And if yes, how so?
Yes, so this is actually, we work in terms of promoting tourism in the landscape. It's one of our lines of action. We actually have our own touristic packages. We run local accommodations. We have a network of local producers. And that's the kind of tourism that we are focused. Conservation or nature tourism, tourism that has a positive impact in the landscapes. So we coordinate a large network of providers, from the touristic operators, local accommodations, restaurants, the whole thing. And we always have all of our touristic activities, this messaging, this narrative, that this is the kind of tourism that really makes a difference. And we also communicate it like that, so that we try to attract the people to come and visit the Greater Kova Valley, that have that kind of mindset of wanting to be the kind of tourist that leaves a lasting positive impact where they visit.
Thank you, Marta. So is the Koa Valley really promoted as such as a tourist destination? Because I know there's differing opinions on how to go about that. Because some
No,
areas,
it
yeah.
is. It is. I mean, it's actually so because I know in some areas tourism is a problem because there's a lot of it, but the Greater Koa Valley is one of the least visited areas in the whole of the country.
Okay.
So we have very few tourists at the moment, and we're trying to get a few more, not massive amounts, but a few more to come and visit. And so we do promote it. Yeah, try and get people to come.
Yeah, and when you do it, of course, you want to do it in a way that actually makes sense for the
Yeah.
area and they leave a positive impact, not a negative one. Very nice. I think those were the questions. Jessica, I'm just looking to you. Yeah, very good. Then, yeah, we're reaching the end of our webinar already. I just want to take one more second to say, share screen. Well, to say thank you. Thank you to our speakers. Thank you to everybody that participated in this webinar today. I think, yeah, there was a high interest, and it's clear that the topic is of high interest. And I'm really just super happy that we were able to reach so many people. Thank you also to the colleagues over at Rewilding Europe for helping to set up the program, and of course the colleagues at Natura Connect and Andre as well. We would love to hear from you if you actually enjoyed the webinar. I definitely did. I'm once again fully inspired by what's happening across Europe. But yeah, we have a little feedback survey. It literally shouldn't take you more than 2 minutes. And I always think help us help you. So let us know what you liked, what you maybe didn't like so much. And that helps us create yeah, outputs, materials, events that actually serve your needs. For now, I wish everybody a very happy European Day of Parks on Sunday. Do get out into nature. Have a look on our website, all the events happening across Europe. Maybe there's something happening near you that you can participate in. If you're out in nature and you feel like sharing your story, then do tag us, use the special EDOP hashtags. I will be canoeing tomorrow on the Donau. I can't wait. Weather is looking great, so we have a nice sunny long weekend ahead of us where we can fully celebrate Europe's parks and protected areas. Stay in touch with us. Keep an eye on our social media. All of our upcoming events will be posted there. And yeah, thank you so much once again for participating in the webinar. And yeah, I hope to see you again soon at another event. Take care and have a nice weekend. Bye bye.